Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voice by Matt show. My name is Matt Bertho. I'm your host. And today I have a good friend that I met probably last January, I
Yep.
think,
Yep.
at the BLN. David Chametzky, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing okay, man. I got to tell you, it's all good. We talked a little bit of the green room, but life is good. You got to keep figuring out how to move on. And anytime I get to spend a little time with my friend Matt, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. David, you make me laugh. Like you're a comedian and you're an author and you help people. But on this show, it's about how did you find your voice? And I can't wait for you to share some of your stories because they are very powerful. I get the privilege of getting to teach David about his voice. He's been working with me, and he's a good soul. So thank you so much for doing this podcast today, David.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. And finding your voice is so important. The story, and then being able to say it right. Reason why you and I came together as a working is I was like, okay, my voice was getting tired. I knew what my stories are. The stories are my stories. That's the easy part, but to communicate it in a way that becomes powerful for others. Because if I'm just telling you my story, you could be my friend and just listening, and it's entertainment in a form. But when we take our stories and take it to that next level, to then be able to guide people, or as I say, be the pathfinder for others to walk them through that experience and use their voice in the best way possible, that's really such a challenge.
Hmm. So if you guys can watch it on YouTube, David has this amazing background behind him. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah. So the background behind me is my book, When Your Heart Knows It's Your Time to Soar. It's my
Hmm.
first book, and it has a lot of personal stories in there that I've experienced, just some of them, not all negative, and there's some poetry or random, things that I put together over the years. And what I've also done for other people, because again, if it's just my story, it's entertainment. I want you to deep dive within yourself to look at those pathfinder perspectives, those stories. But then, what do you take out of it? Like one of the stories I talk about is my one of my first loves, who got killed by a drunk driver. But
Man.
how are we living our first loves, and do we love ourselves? Do we count ourselves when we talk about love? Do we
Hmm.
count ourselves in that? I had not. I didn't know that loving myself was an option at some time in my life. I
Hmm.
was asked it for the first time about 5 years ago at this point, and it froze me. I didn't even think that that's an option. Not that I didn't, but I never took time to think about it. And I think when we take time to think about the stories in our lives, the voices in our life, that's where we get to learn a lot more. Not about the things that we had that happened, not only the wins, because sometimes we don't learn enough during the wins that it makes us to lose or have less good opportunities in the future.
Yeah.
And I think we dive into the darker pieces. That's among the work that I do, to then really take it into the next level on figuring out what happened, why did it happen to me, and how can I stop it from happening. And
Hmm.
until I took time to do that, my voice wasn't as strong as it is now.
Yeah. Well, what exactly was asked to you 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I was right after a suicide attempt. I had gone to see my acupuncturist, who I'm still seeing, and she said, "Well, the first question I want to ask you is, do you love yourself?"
Hmm.
And I froze,
Hmm.
and I was like, "What?" And she asked me the question again, and I broke down and crying. Not only was I pausing, but the answer was, at that moment, I definitely did not love myself. I
Hmm.
didn't like some of the things that I did, or some of the stories in my life, and it was so heavy and debilitating. Now I could say I love myself. No, every day is not a good day. I'm not here to say that now everything's a good day. I love myself, but I do love myself every day. So, when things are going bad, yeah, I still might work a little slower. I might focus a little bit more on myself, or I might not focus on myself. But I'm not going to go down that dark path of trying to hurt myself or hurt others because I'm feeling bad. That's part of the voice that I've learned. Because during the my suicide attempt, a voice that I had heard was, "It's not your time, and you need to talk about it." And we need to, as a
Mm.
society, talk about our mental wellness. And it's not just, "Hey, Matt, are you having a good day or a bad day?" And we always say, "Yeah, yeah," or "Today's not great," and then nobody asks that other question, "How can I support you?" I have
Wow.
now had that voice, so when I listen to people and I go, "Look, I would love to support you in the way that you need supported," and that's really what I've done. So now I support myself on those days when I need to. I still get frustrated at times. I don't feel supported by others, but I also have to ask. That if we don't ask, that's part of that voice that I'm not ashamed anymore of what I did, though I don't like all the things I did. Now with my current voice, I see the voice as it's my responsibility to talk up. It's my responsibility to show up and
Mm.
show people what they can do. I mean, we were just talking in the green room, about that narcissistic piece that you do all these things on Facebook. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it to say, hey, I'd love you to be what I am, what I'm doing. Showing up doesn't always mean that you have to support everything, but finding out what showing up means for you and then what showing up for me feels for me as well could be completely different things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fine line between selfish, egotistical, narcissistic, and loving yourself and doing what's best for you first. And, you know, God knows and you know what your intentions are. And I think that that is very difficult right now for men to show that we do love ourselves, that we do care about ourselves without destroying everything around us or people perceiving that we are not caring about other people, that we care about only us. Um,
I
you
think
know,
that's
I,
part of the challenge. Let me just stop for a second because it's others' perceptions.
yep.
That if you know what's in your heart, and at the end of the day, God knows what's in your heart because He's in your heart. It's an energy, and that's what I talk about. It doesn't matter. So if I come on here and say, "Hey, Matt, this and that," and then you're like, "Dave, that's all about you. Thanks, but that's not really what I was looking for." That's maybe your perception. Maybe the way I'm saying it, I won't deny that there's opportunities to look at things differently. But if in my heart I know I'm doing the best I can, I don't want anybody to say, "Well, that's just not right. It's not making," unless I'm doing something against somebody. I think there's bigger conversations. And that's why communication and having your voice is so important because it's more than just a voice going out there. It's how we're using our voice and how we're listening. Listening is just as important as how we're saying it.
Well, I think that's great. So, David, give us some tips on how to listen better.
Well, sometimes it's just asking that question again. So if you're saying you're not feeling well and I really want to help you in that healing, I go, well, could you explain to me? How does that feel? A lot of times when I talk about in my comic book, the five senses, I talk about, how does it feel, taste, look, hear, listen? Because a lot of times listening is, if we listen it through a filter, that becomes a big challenge. So I want to make sure that I'm hearing what Matt's saying, not what I think Matt is saying. Right?
Mm.
We all I use it all the time. The ICTA disease. I know that already. I know what Matt's going to do because I know Matt for a million years, and this is what he's always done. Instead of saying, "Hey, I know Matt, but I also know that he keeps growing. So let me ask some more questions differently." So really asking questions. I know that doesn't sound congruent in that when we say about how to listen by asking more questions, but asking the right questions. Matt, are you feeling this way to make sure that I understand it and have no judgments about how Matt's feeling or how Dave's feeling? Those are really important things when we're listening to somebody and showing up. And it's tough because other people go, no, no, you don't understand what I mean. Well, could you explain it to me? Again, asking the right questions, not just asking questions, asking the right questions. And when you do that, you're able to dive down, because people a lot of times are asking questions that they think they know the answer to because of pain that they've experienced.
Mm.
And when we can remove ourselves out of our own pain or pain that we've experienced with even with the same partner or different partners, that becomes a little bit more powerful.
So, Dave, take us back a little bit. How you grew up, mom and dad, um, the corporate life, and then because that journey is important on how you have found your voice as a speaker, as a comedian, as a person that is on podcasts. You use your voice quite a bit. Um, how did you fight to find this voice as a child growing up? Like how did this all happen for you?
Yeah, ironically, as a child, I didn't have a voice. I didn't do that. In fact, one of my earliest memories of speaking was being ridiculed in a math class
Hmm.
because we were in the old days, there weren't computers, and we hand wrote our assignments, right? So we had this oral presentation I had to give, and I had to use the word statistics, and I wrote statics. And the teacher
Hmm.
kept on saying, "Could you say it again? Could you say it again?" And then he took the paper out of my hand, ripped my hand out in front of the class, and said, "That's why you're doing it. You wrote it wrong, also." Not necessarily the teachers or the beliefs that we have now. And math wasn't my best subject then. So, that wasn't going to lead me to greater growth. And it didn't. So, a lot of times I was afraid to speak for many, many years.
Well, yeah,
And, I would speak up.
absolutely.
I would speak up. I learned from grew up in a house of yellers. So, yelling didn't really offend me. But the real part is that became interesting is when I got my job, this I was always a leader. So no matter what happened, I was one of those people that the others looked up to,
Hmm.
and not looked up to as a, oh my God, he's great. But when there was somebody didn't want to lead, I'd raise my hands. And I had done that plenty of times. And one of the times I had done that is when I first got into the corporation I was working for. And they were like, hey, could you go out and do some counterfeit training? Train people how to identify counterfeit medicine. Okay, I guess,
Wow.
and it was a new job. So you didn't want to say no. Didn't want to disappoint. And I started doing that. And then the first time they were, hey, how would you like to talk in front of 200 people? I was like, no, thank you. And but I did. I got up there. It was easy because the counterfeit medicine I was able to talk about was just kind of like a jokey type of thing, and it felt comfortable. And I knew a lot of the other presenters, so it also made me, even though I didn't know the 200 people, it was nice. I was in Puerto Rico. We were presenting in front of 200 law enforcement. So if you've ever been around law enforcement, they once you get in that past that wall, they let you in, and
Oh,
that was nice. So I felt in a comfortable situation, and I had done that for about 5 years, and then my position
wow.
transitioned to something else. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun, and I knew I can speak, and then I got remarried, and we went through some challenges. I put myself through therapy, and I learned my one of the resources that I use called havening. I know you've heard me talk about it, in that it's that rubbing your hands, which that reset button that we all have within ourselves. So I learned the reset button within Dave. I was in my 40s at that point. Yeah, just like that. If you rub your hands for a little bit like that, it'll automatically calm you down, no matter what you're doing.
Huh.
It'll create the delta waves in your brain, and those are the brain waves we use when we go to sleep.
That's so
And
cool, David.
yeah, yeah, I guess you haven't paid attention when I, when I
No, I
yeah,
remember you talking about it, the BLN
yeah,
or the CLA actually.
yeah.
Um, I forgot. I forgot
Yeah, no,
about it.
and we forget, and that's the thing. Also, is we forget. Sometimes we need to be reminded of so many things because we have too many outside influences, and that goes back to your question before. If you know what's in your heart, again, when your clients go up to speak, they know that they're showing up. And there's a great conversation of you, right? The night before one of that CLA presentation, you told me, "Where's your balls?" And I go, "Huh?" And then we talked it out a little bit. I was like, "All right, I got it in my head." And it was one of the times that people were like, "Holy moly!" I got on a chair in the middle of a stage and showed them the one of the times that I attempted suicide. That had to note the and everybody was like, "Whoa!" And then I had the audience. That's how I started it out, and wow,
That
it
was
was
a hook.
powerful.
That was a
Yeah,
hook.
but it's showing up as my authentic self.
Yeah.
Is
And
not just showing up to talk, and that's where a lot of people think that they need to do is just their voices. I'll tell you my story. What was the story? Was more powerful than just my story was what I did, but also what I was teaching everybody about resilience by showing up again, being able to talk about it in front of some people, and also grow through it.
well, I
And go
I
ahead.
think one of the coolest parts about the way that you speak is that you're able to take such a dark, tragic thing and make it funny and normal, um, but also take the embarrassment of what you went through and make light of it, which it's like a superpower. Like I'm still trying to figure that out, you know? Um,
Well, I don't want to say it's all me. I don't know. We talked about God a little bit before. I heard this voice while I was attempting suicide in a different way, not the rope. Um, and they were like, "No, it's not your time, and you need to go tell people about this. You need to talk to people about this."
that's
And
so
I didn't believe it, and because of who I am and a little stubborn, I'm not perfect. I was like, "No, I'm going to go keep trying." And each time, it obviously, because we're here today, didn't work. And then the rope situation, I'm hanging there, and I go, okay, now what? And I literally was like, okay, you're a dick. Like, okay, like you're just hanging there, and now what? Like
yeah.
I could have continued to try other ways and other means. 100%. But I was like, no, you were told, now what? How do you put together life again? And while life was very heavy for me at that time, I was able to heal myself, put my life back together in a way that became more healthy for me.
So David, let me ask this question. In your family tree, was your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, did they have any depression issues?
Yeah, as I've done deep dives. I mean, both my grandfathers, they were both World War II veterans. That's why veteran are really part of my passion and have always been. One grandfather was a commissioned officer, a, a field, became a sergeant, a major sergeant, and he had once sent up a boy up a hill. A boy. My grandfather was 22 at that point. Let's put it all in perspective. But he had the experience. He'd become a sergeant, and the boy didn't come home.
Dang.
And he then walked over to his commanding officer and said, "I'll shoot anybody you want, but I am never sending another person up any hills." And he has some other war stories. He came back and he was a functional alcoholic. He was a drill instructor and became a functional alcoholic. Then my other grandfather was a cook in Africa. And when the
What?
cook is not a cook, what they do is they also are medics, not to take care of the people, but they move the bodies, the injuries, the dead bodies, removing bodies. And he came home a different person. And that's how my mom grew up. So we all have had stories, maybe not like those two, but stories in our lives where it's affected them, and it affected my parents how they grew up. One my
Well,
mom was very emotional, and my dad didn't necessarily talk much. He was more of a yeller.
and I bring all that up because I know in my family tree, depression has is something that I mean I've really had to face head on because the other choice is that we have are the darkness, which is suicide, right? My grandfather committed suicide when I was in high school. My dad didn't really want to talk about it. He did drink quite a bit. It was this yo-yo thing that he would do, and unfortunately, in June 2020, he died of the widowmaker heart attack. And I remember when that happened, I realized, wow, I've really got to deal with all these emotions, with
Mm.
all this stuff, because I think spiritually and energetically, some of that stuff gets passed down to the next generation, right?
Sure,
And that's
epigenetics is a whole, yeah, is a whole different
so
type of
that's one
science.
reason for me why I finally did say yes to God's calling of me helping people let their soul come out and say hello. Because part of the soul, I believe, is emotion. I think emotion is expression of our soul. That's why people love singing. That's why people love acting. Um, but true emotion is powerful. And when we attach emotion to words, whether it's good or evil, it's powerful. And I never heard my grandpa or my dad really like use their words for their emotions, but I would feel it. I would
Yeah.
feel it, but
Well,
I couldn't distinguish what was what. Like what is dad sad? Is he okay? Like is he upset? Is he angry? Is he frustrated? So even with my two boys Max and Leo, I go way overboard probably with the people that I love and the people that I communicate with to talk to them, to have real conversations that are not pleasant, that are not easy. Um, and because that's what I teach my clients to speak, like with emotion, it gets rather uncomfortable. And it's sad to me that it's so uncommon for people to actually speak with emotion
yeah.
when if I did not speak with emotion, I would be on the same track of my grandpa and the same track of my dad.
You could be right. We wouldn't know, but having that real conversation. So even the more difficult conversations with your son, and with yourself, really then opens you up to different growth that men of your grandfather and your father's age, and like my father and my grandfather,
Yeah.
they didn't talk much. I mean, even at the very end, my grandfather started sharing a little bit of the war stories that he couldn't unpack, uh, 40, 50 years after the fact that it happened.
Man.
And, now because you're strong enough, you're able to do that and have different resources and acknowledge it. Part of it is about acknowledging. When we have our voice since we're little, but how do we learn? How do we learn those frustrations and managing those frustrations? And when you're a parent, it's frustrating. I mean, those teenage years, man, I'm still sort of struggling through it with my girls, but I now, say, I let them know, hey, I'm frustrated, and let me tell you why I'm frustrated. You don't have to do anything differently. Or separately, a lot of times I'll walk into their rooms and I'll go, I don't need you to respond. Just know I love you. I think
Huh.
everybody needs to hear I love you,
Yep.
and mean it. Not just, hey, Matt, I love you. Yeah, Dave, I love you. Like if and I say this now to my friends all the time, I love you. It's not a romantic thing. It's not a, I, and the reason why I do it is because I don't want there ever to be a doubt of, if I'm overweight, so a widowmaker, right? I have a friend who passed away unexpectedly in 2022, and I know what I said to him last, and it was caring about him. And I know how he feels through some of his actions afterwards. I've son, and I took care of his mom. It was one of my management. Again, the voice is what we promise ourselves, but also what we uphold when nobody's looking, right? That's the integrity piece of who we are. When Kevin passed away, his mother has Alzheimer's, and I could have walked away. Nobody would have known. Nobody, all the promises I made, it's all good, right? It's all good when the lights are off and it happens in the morning. But I stood for 6 months taking care of his mom until she transitioned. And I was with her for the
Wow,
last 3 days of
Dave.
her life because that's what I do. I wasn't doing it because of me. It's not, you know, I'm great because what I do. It's just who I am. And I know I can look myself in the mirror. I don't like all the things I did in my past, but there's some things I'm really proud of doing because I showed up for me.
Oh, that's so good. That made me feel so good hearing that. And I know when people heard that part, it makes us understand the best parts of about us being a human. Because we are supposed to take care of each other.
Yeah,
We are supposed to
100%.
be helpful, and you know,
Yeah, I mean, like today, actually, when we're recording, I don't know when you release it, is one of my landed daughter's birthdays. I sent her a birthday card every year. Uh, that's what I do. People are like, why do you do that? Are you looking to try to get back? No, I don't say anything about anything else. And to me, it's this love is an energy. If we make sure our love is clean and unfiltered, that unconditional love, that's what that's what God talks about. He doesn't talk about love. Hey, I'm going to love you when you wear, teal shirts. I'm going to love you when you do this. He goes, I love you. And at the end of the day, if we embrace that love of who we are, what we do, there's some power in that.
man, that's so good, Dave. So, tell us about what's going on now with David, and where are you going? We had a meeting last night about the comic book I get to be in.
Yeah.
Um, that's something that David does really well. He also helps people with their messaging and their books. But tell us where you're at now, where you're going.
Yeah, so December, my position got eliminated in corporate America, so I'm not as brave as others who just walk away. But I embraced the opportunity. Sometimes we don't have to like the opportunity we're presented, and then what do we do? So what have I been doing? I finished up my comic book, and that came out this past January. And I think everybody needs to have a comic book, not only because I do it, but it's a way to tell your business. So if you have a business, you have a voice, having your voice being shown in other places, rooms that you're not in, there's a power there. It's much like having a book where I help people write their own book.
So I've
It's
never
more,
asked you this question. Where did the comic book idea come from for you?
well, the comic book came out again out of my darkness. When I was going through right after post suicide, I started thinking about my life a little bit, and I kept on hearing Sisyphus. And
What?
anybody who doesn't know, the Sisyphus is the guy who pushes the rock up the hill and then it goes back down. And then there's stories around that eventually he found joy in doing that. Originally he hated it because it was the monotonous tasks. And then he found a joy and a pride in exactly what he did. And I was like, that's what I need. I need to find the pride within myself. While all the things that I've gone through, I'm not proud of, but I got through it. And that's among the resilience.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, so I'm not proud of all the things that I've done in the past, but I got through it. And
Hmm.
it's all about resilience. And I've determined for myself, I don't want to be, even though I'm pushing the rock up the hill and back down at times, I also want to make sure that it's not the same hill and not the same rock. I want to make sure I don't keep going into the ashes. of my life and keep crash burning. I now know how to avoid the crashes. There's still going to be crashes. There's still going to be things coming up in my life. 2022, like I just told you, my friend passed away, his mother passed away, and then my own mother passed away in that year. And that, basically between February and October, that was my life, being a caregiver in some forms for three people who were tremendous in my life. It wasn't just somebody who I knew. It was bedrock people, the people who are part of my personal foundation. And for the most part, I managed it really well, which I could not have managed years ago. If I had not gone through the deep dive in my life, I might not have been able to get out of it if I had not attempted suicide.
Isn't that crazy? Like
Yeah,
that's
but it's the
crazy.
darkness, but it's the darkness that lets us see the light. It's the good that allows us to know. It's the bad that allows
Uh,
us to know what's
uh,
good. Yeah, I know. Blah
but
blah
why do we
blah
have to
blah
go
blah.
through that though? Why? Why?
How else are you
Why?
going to learn if I let you win every time? So you're just going to take it for granted. We take it for granted. We're humans. We're living the human experience. It sucks. There's no way around it. But when you find the ways to get through the suckiness, it becomes so much better. And there's power in it. Like even, I told you before, I'll be honest. So I haven't been feeling great the past 2 days, just personal stuff. And look how I'm talking now. I know when I connect with people, I love to do it. It's not a phony thing. I know my resources. I know how to use my resources. And sometimes your resources are just sit home with a gallon of ice cream and eat them. I didn't eat a gallon of ice cream.
No.
Not.
Don't
Well, I
tell me
have.
that right now. Don't give me.
I,
Don't even give me that
I,
permission.
I have, but not now because I won't allow it because I know I also feel that I'm not healthy physically. So I'm working on this week. I started. I've been working out 3 times a day. These little aerobic things, and it's struggling. And I'm like, well, why am I doing it? And I go, I'm doing it for me. And that goes back to that where we started. I love myself enough that I don't have to do the coaching. I don't have to write books with people. I enjoy doing it. It's part of who I am, but it's not who I am. But I'm going to be Dave no matter what. Not looking for the exit row. I'm not looking for anything other than doing the best that I can do.
So, Dave, talk to us about what it is that you do right now to help people that are business professionals, and how can they reach you?
Okay, yeah. So what I do is I help them create their story where you work on their voice. I create their story, how it aligns to their true authentic self. And what we do with that is, it's branding for entrepreneurs, for executives. I've worked with C-suite people who want to get to that next level or know how to manage, because not only is it the story, it's what resources we use and how we manage it. I worked in 30 years of corporate experience, and I've seen lots of people manage the stress levels differently. And because I've been trained in many different ways, including that rubbing your hands, the simple rubbing your hands, which goes deeper when we work with somebody one on one, that becomes who you are, knowing your resources.
Hmm.
So even just now, when I was explaining to you about me feeling less good, I know what I have to do, and I'm doing what I have to do. And then the switch will flip, and I'll be fine because I knew how to keep my head above water and talk to the people that I need to. That if I had to reach out to somebody like Matt, just saying, "Hey, Matt, I need to talk to somebody,"
Yeah.
those are the resources that you have. And that's what I help people do. And people want to get on stages. So when they have their story, so again, the story that I told you about my suicide attempt, then you get on stages, not talking about yourself. It might be your story, and then the power is unleashing your story to help somebody like Matt or somebody like anybody else.
Yep.
And then also creating podcasts. So those are the three things I do by aligning the brand with the story and taking it to that next level. And to find me, it's pretty easy. My name is unique. It's Dave Chametzky. So you can go on to davidchametzky.com, social
Hey.
media. That's where you find me. And, it's so powerful because when I get to talk to people, I love hearing their story. Even for 30 minutes during one of my free Pathfinder perspectives that I talk to people, I've changed lives in those 30 minutes that has not been all about being a client. It's
Mm,
been giving them resources and ideas. What I do is I kind of create the clay, shape it, but it's your table, it's your vase, your piece of clay, what you want to shape it to.
I love that. Well, David, you've been asked these four questions before. We got a few minutes left, so I want to ask the questions because
All
you've
right.
had to answer them before. So let's see how you do on the podcast on live. Ready?
Woo!
Number one, what do you love more than anything in the whole world? What do you love?
I love my kids, which is the easy answer, but I do, even when they frustrate me. I love a really good hug, a hug that you mean.
That's
Uh,
good.
so that's something I really love.
Physical touch. That must be
Yep,
one of your love languages.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay, what makes you tick? What gets you excited? What gives you joy?
Seeing somebody else smile. I do a lot of charity work, and I was just doing.
Hey, you didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, so I'll include it right now. Is this weekend I supported the D3 organization, which is a Disability Dream and Do, and I got to work with some special needs or disabled individuals to play baseball on a minor league ball field, the Yankees minor league ball field,
That's
and to see
awesome.
these kids smile and to laugh and to joke, but to participate exactly as they should, showing up with their limitations, but playing all out. That was something that really made me smile this weekend.
Oh, I love that. And I felt it and I saw it. What a joy. What a lucky joy. Um Next question. Let's see. That one made me really happy. Oh, what are your purposes?
Okay, yeah. My purpose is to make the world better, not to be not feeling, trying to assist who I can to not feel the way that I felt, where I didn't have a voice, where I didn't couldn't tell my story because it wasn't great, it, you know, or just being embarrassed by my story, and really my purpose is to let everybody know that there was a lesson. If you're embarrassed by your story, it was a lesson on how to grow through it,
Man.
and
I needed to hear that today, David.
we grow through it, man. That's why we take every opportunity that comes up for us, and there's an opportunity for growth, even when we're not feeling good. There's an opportunity for growth in the worst feelings that you're going through.
Yep. Why is David on Earth?
I have no idea. I'm no. Truthfully, that was a joke. I'm on Earth to make a difference. Muhammad Ali has this quote that's saying, the service that we pay to others is the price we pay for being here. So I enjoy giving with my Goons for Good and all the other opportunities because I know that if I can share my story and one person heard me, that becomes really powerful. Because when I did my TEDx talk, uh, 9 families reached out to me, and while it wasn't the best TEDx talk, the presentation wasn't. It was too weighty for me at that point, where I was in my healing, but
Yeah.
I still got it, and I was able to talk to people about suicide, and with families who reached out to me who were going through those challenges, and I was able to work with them to get them professional help. I know where my limitations are, but there were 2 families whose family members were successful, and they wanted to understand the process. And while each process might be different, I got to tell you, I showed up and I gave them some sort of grace for that period of their through their healing.
One person at a time.
That's it.
Well, David, thank you so much for being on the show today. Do you have any more wisdom for us or any final thoughts?
Nah, just as always, with my own podcast, always find peace and love in your life, and when you need to swing a bat, make sure it's bringing awesome thoughts. And I wish you some awesome thoughts, Matt, as always, and peace and love.
Yeah. So you can find David on social media where?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. The podcast is on Apple.
All right.
So you could find me. Chametzky's not that low, but I looked recently. I did a Google search. I'm the fifth ranked Chametzky. My uncle was a professor, and some of my cousins are professors. But I'm the fifth ranked Chametzky. So
That's
I'm not.
awesome.
So my goal is to get up there, get the Google rankings a little higher, though.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show, David. I love your soul. I love your kind heart, and I love your mission. And if you guys need help finding your messaging, telling your story, you want to get a comic book going, you need a great speaker to talk about really tough situations like suicide, get with David. He'll help you out. David, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you for the opportunity. God bless you.
Talk to you guys next week.